Lead us in prayer. All right. Heavenly Father, thank you for letting us come together. Enlighten your words and help us to understand your text in Esther. Lord, just shine your light upon this text and help us to see what we are to gain from it. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Okay, so tonight we're going to be talking about Esther chapter 2. So when the curtain rises and the play begins, we see and hear the actors and actresses tell a story. And this chapter in the study is called Trusting God's Work, okay? But the most important person in the play is not on the stage. The director is the one who has instructed the cast for months on where to stand and sit and when and how to say a line. The director is behind the scenes giving final instructions, touching up makeup, and encouraging the players. The play is a success because of the director who has orchestrated every detail of the play. In the book of Esther, God is not mentioned, but he is the key figure in the story. He works through the circumstances to place everything in order so that his plans will be accomplished. God is the director of our lives as well. As we look back at different times in our lives, we can see his handprints all over. Our response to him is to look for his hand moving and to trust his direction. So for the group discussion for tonight, describe a time in your past when you saw God work through circumstances in your life to bring something about. Anybody want to start off? No one's ever seen God's hand in your life.
Trying to think. Sure, really every day.
Okay. What example? Do you have one in particular?
What about that?
Where you had a picture, I think it was, of your pond or lake or whatever and the trees.
Oh, Saturday or Sunday morning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see God through creation in that.
Yeah, I think it's evident this time of year. When you see the change of the seasons. To me, it's just a reminder that you can cast off the old and start new and prepare for a new start for spring,
The way I feel about it is every decision I make, he's there, good or bad.
Okay.
If I go out and jump on a lawnmower and before I leave the garage, if I check and I got a lot of gas, I'm all right. That's a decision that he helped me make, or else if I'd have pulled out and got up to my down my mother's house with it or something, I run out of gas. Well, he's showing me I should have checked the gas.
Checked it beforehand.
I mean, that's the way I feel. That any move I make, or if I don't know, driving, if I
how you react and stuff, right?
Or something,
yeah.
Yeah.
I know for me, being a pastor was not part of my plan. But halfway through our Bible study, our disciple Bible study, I knew that I had to serve God. I didn't know the capacity of what it was going to be, but I saw his hand working to get me to that direction. And then a little after halfway through the Bible, I said that, I need to go into ministry. So it was kind of interesting to see all the stuff that was going on in my life to set me up for that. All the things that I had been through. And even in the process, the stuff that was going on to prepare me to lead a flock was awesome to see how God was working through that. So how has God used circumstances to prepare you for your current role in God's work in the world?
Is that the same question or a different one?
Different. So how has God made you who you are so that you could do his work? Sally, you're a hairdresser, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those ladies talk quite a bit, don't they?
Yeah.
So that's your opportunity that you could talk to them about your faith and about God and about different things. And it would allow you to testify to them as to the power of Christ. And so, maybe that's one way you could look at it. Or Norma, you talked to a lot of people, played a lot of cards with people, right? And you could talk to them about your faith and what it's done for you and, set you up in those circumstances.
I think after Billy passed away is when I woke up.
Okay.
And then I lost Mark. But
Yeah.
it seems like if you ever get in trouble, you can lay in bed and think, and then the next thing you know, you're praying.
Yeah. You're right.
It
And
seems like that's who you can go to.
right, that's right. And that's why I often ask, who are the people that don't believe in God? Who do they go to? Even when people are hurt and they're not in the right frame of mind, they still pray, don't they? A lot of them will pray even though they don't know God. So God tells us, in the Bible that if you've seen creation, then you've seen God. And there's no excuse why you can't believe in him. So you have to take it that way. And my brother's a good example of that too. He's probably where I was about 4 years ago. So he's running a little bit behind me. But he started talking to people when he travels. And him being a salesman, because he has the natural gift of gab and sell ice to an Eskimo, he tells people about his faith all the time on planes, in lines, talks about Jesus and stuff. He says, well, I don't know if I'm doing anything for the kingdom of God. I said, well, you're witnessing to people, and you're telling them about this stuff. And I said, so you are, you just don't realize it. And God has put each individual here in this world and set up your entire life and how things have happened so that you could testify to other people about what he has done in your life, the good and the bad, to show, hey, you know what, even though maybe something bad has happened, this is what God has done for me. Maybe he kept me alive through this situation, or he had these people do this stuff for me. Like for me, an example, just the absolute hell, as I will say it, that I went through in my younger years and my teenage years prepared me pretty much for anything that hits me now, with the exception of my kids, because it's always going to be hard with children. But there could be a bomb going off, things on fire, and I don't get too worked up about it. It just keeps me nice and easy most of the time through it. And, it's all the stuff that I lived through that had set me up for that. Because if I hadn't gone through all the things I had, I wouldn't be able to deal with it. And I thank God for that, because I know there was a time in my life where I just destroyed stuff. And I didn't care what it was. I mean, just, hi. Welcome. You're okay. No, I mentioned the wrong time to people, so it's my fault too. I said 6:30 on Facebook, and then I told a lot of people 6. So
Okay.
my fault. No big deal.
So now next Tuesday, what is it?
6. Yes.
Oh,
It'll be 6 next Tuesday. Or does that not work for you?
no, it's whatever works for everyone else.
Okay.
It's just tough for me to get here. That's okay.
Well, if you're late, don't worry about it.
Right.
No problem. So we got to understand that even when we look through Esther and we see this, we see God working through Esther and through her circumstances for the people of Israel. The plan that is put into action to replace Queen Vashti is extensive and detailed. It takes approximately 4 years to complete. Think about that. So just to find the next queen took 4 years, even though we're reading it like it happened the next day. So we're in Esther 2, by the way.
I think I'm losing my mind. There's got to be somebody up there.
Check it out.
No, there is someone up there. I saw him in the window. So up in the back. A gentleman. I don't know. He looked familiar, but they are upstairs, like kind of in the back room. And you can see him in the window. I don't know.
I'll just keep
Sorry.
hearing thump, thump, thump.
No, there is someone up there. I saw him.
Hang on.
You can hear him walk.
Because I thought maybe we were meeting upstairs. I'm thinking, I don't know why they'd meet up there in that little room. So then I came back around.
Isn't somebody coming about the steps?
Mhm.
At first I thought I was hearing things, then I picked
No.
something and
Dave.
Dave.
Oh. What's Dave doing?
I couldn't tell from the window.
It's Dave and the chairlift guys.
oh,
They're putting stuff on the steps.
Oh,
Okay, so you're right.
There is a guy up there. Yeah,
yeah.
2 guys. So we're gonna read Esther 2.
You know, the same one that Brenda had was the same one that David got.
Yeah.
Who would like to start with the first couple verses of chapter 2?
I'll start.
Okay.
After these things, when the wrath of King Xerxes subsided, he remembered Vashti, what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's servants who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather all the beautiful young virgins to Shushan, the citadel, into the women's quarters, under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, custodian of the women, and let beauty preparations be given them. Then let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." This thing pleased the king, and he did so.
Okay. Pauline, you want to go?
There was a certain Jew in the capital of
Susa.
Shushan, whose name was Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Semai, the son of Kish, and Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives, taken away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, who had carried into exile. He had brought up Xerxes. Is that Xerxes?
No.
No. He brought up Hadassah. That is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The maiden was beautiful and lovely, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So when the king's command and his decree were proclaimed, and when many maidens were gathered in Shushan, the capital, under the custody of Haggai, Esther also was taken to the king's house in the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women.
Okay. Which verse did you end at?
8.
Eight.
Start at 9.
Up there.
You ended at 9?
9.
Start at 9?
Start at 9.
Haggai, who was responsible for the harem, was very much impressed with her and did his best to make her happy. He ordered a special menu for her, favored her for the beauty treatments, gave her 7 girls from the palace as her maids, and gave her the most luxurious apartment in the harem. Esther hadn't told anyone that she was a Jewess, for Mordecai had said not to. He came daily to the court of the harem to ask about Esther and to find out what was happening to her. Let me read 12.
Go ahead with 12.
The instructions concerning these girls were that they would, being taken to the king's bed, each would be given 6 months of beauty treatments with oil of myrrh, followed by 6 months of special perfumes and ointments. Then as each girl's turn came from spending the night with the king,
Xerxes.
Okay. She was given her choice of clothing or jewelry she wished to enhance her beauty. She was taken to the king's apartment in the evening, and the next morning returned to the second harem where the king's wives lived. There she was under the care of
Shazgaz is what I have.
another of the king's
Eunuchs.
and lived there for the rest of her life, never seeing the king again unless he especially enjoyed her and called her by name.
Okay, so 15, I believe.
Xerxes then had been king for 7 years when Esther's turn came to go to him during Tebeth, the 9th month of the year. Everyone liked Esther. The king's personal servant Haggai was in charge of the woman, and Esther trusted Haggai and asked him what she ought to take with her. Xerxes liked Esther more than he did any of the other young women. None of them pleased him as much as she did. And right away he fell in love with her and crowned her queen in place of Vashti.
Mm-hmm.
In honor of Esther, he gave a big dinner for his leaders and officials. Then he declared a holiday everywhere in his kingdom and gave expensive gifts.
So 19 and 20.
Mordecai uncovers a conspiracy.
Uh,
So this is a different
no,
Bible than I usually read.
Start with 19.
Yeah. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. But Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do so. For she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions, as she had done when he was bringing her up. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigadath and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were hung as on a gallows, and this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king.
In my interpretation, it says when Mordecai's story was found to be true, the two men were impaled on a sharpened pole.
Yeah.
So it's a little different there.
Oh, yeah, I got my other Bible's at the other church.
You're okay. No worries. So what do you think about that? Just off the top of your head.
Love story.
Okay, it's a love story,
Definitely.
right? If the king wanted you and he was pleased with you after spending a night with you, you got to go back to him again. Boy, how privileged would you feel, right?
Because she kept her nationality secret.
Yeah.
So it's,
Sure.
Yeah, so Esther kept her nationality a secret. She didn't say that she was Jewish. Probably because they didn't have a big favor of the Jewish people. But we have to remember too, and one of my footnotes says this, but I wanna say it to you guys if I can find which one it was. Their exile had been about 100 years earlier. So the Jewish people had been given freedom and were allowed to run their own businesses and hold positions in the government. The Bible says that Mordecai's family had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. You know, if this referred to Mordecai himself, he would have been over 100 years old at the time of the story. So most likely they believe that it was Mordecai's great-grandparents that were carried into exile. And so Mordecai was just an offspring after they were in exile, because otherwise he would have been too old to take part in this. Just an interesting fact if you're curious.
did Mordecai upbring Esther?
He did.
Her
He
parents
raised her. Her parents were dead.
Right, okay.
So we don't know how they died. We don't know if they died during the travel to this kingdom. We don't know if they got killed in the kingdom. We have no idea. We just know that Esther was orphaned from her parents, and he was either the uncle or a cousin. It says both in mine.
Okay.
So it's one of the two or both. Maybe it could be, depending on the family tree, I guess. So know that she was raised by Mordecai.
If
7.
if anybody's interested, them steps, they got to take a picture of every step. They take a photograph and every angle and everything, and they put it on a computer so everything is really precise when they
Does
build
it digitally.
when they build it. If you want to see how they're doing it, you take a look there. They got all these little cards laid out. They all got to be level.
They're putting an elevator in, or like a
Yeah,
Stair lift.
Yeah.
chair lift?
Yeah.
Chair lift, yeah.
Okay, so summarize the plan to find a new queen that King Xerxes put into action. Anyone want to take a stab at that?
We had a beauty pageant. for
Yeah,
7 years
basically.
And paraded them in front,
Right.
and then they got to show their wares.
So for
What,
7,
12 months, was it 12 months of beauty treatments? Or something?
yeah, they received like a couple years of beauty treatments before they were even allowed to be with the king.
First 6 months, their skin was rubbed with olive oil, and then
So you're rubbed down with oil, then paraded in front of a king.
olive oil and myrrh, and then the last 6 months he was treated with perfumes and cosmetics.
I mean, you think about
Sounds
that.
pretty fancy.
He was getting girls from all over his kingdom, which was the majority of the Middle East. I mean, at the time, because they had controlled everything. They controlled clear down to the Persian Gulf, all the way up to Cappadocia, Armenia, the Caspian Sea. So they owned, like, if you look at my Bible, and I think it's in Gary's too, but they owned this whole entire region. And so he was pulling women from that entire region. How many he pulled?
I see, does it say how many?
It doesn't.
I haven't seen it.
So, he was quite the woman lover,
Or
apparently.
was it many different as time went on? Like, I didn't know if it was the same.
Yeah, we don't know.
But then they were taken care of the rest of their life.
Yeah. But you had to spend at least one night with the king. If he didn't like you, you got sent to like a fake queen retirement home where you got taken care of. But if he liked you, you had to go back to the king. So think about all the kids that came out of that, and
Oh, yeah.
in the future, So it's a big grand thing, isn't it? King Xerxes can't do anything simple, can he? It has to be on a big scale. Like the first time we looked at Xerxes, he had that huge party that lasted, it was 190 days or something it was. And, had all kinds of crazy drinking stuff going on. And now he's parading all these women around. So, how does Esther enter the story and become the queen?
Well, he chose her, right? Doesn't he? The king chooses her. Does he not? Eventually?
His eunuch chose her too. Is it eunuch? Mm-hmm. He liked her the best, and the king liked her the best.
I think he was just tired of it. So he said to her, okay, this is how this is going to go down. I want you to go in there, and I don't want you to ask for much, because he'll respect that from you. So let's get this over with.
Get this over with.
It's been going on for too long.
Well, you got to think, too, the eunuch, he could look at all these women, but his parts were cut off. So here's a guy thinking, well, I get to see all these beautiful women, and I can't do anything with them or nothing. So maybe if I pick the best one for the king, I'll get some peace in my life or something. I can't imagine trying to be in charge of that many women. So
What do you mean his parts were cut off?
he was a eunuch.
Eunuch, yeah.
They snipped his man parts,
Why did they do that?
so he couldn't do anything with the women.
I think they made him guard the
Save them
women,
for the
but
king.
They couldn't do anything with the women because they had nothing to do anything with.
Save them for the
That
king.
wasn't even-
That's what a eunuch is.
That's what a eunuch is.
Yeah.
They always guard the women.
Yep.
Yeah, this is awful. I don't like that.
Well, welcome to the Old Testament. So she enters, in a grand fashion, right? I mean, she's picked by the eunuch. She's taken care of. They give her 7 handmaidens to help her, for what? She really hadn't done anything, and then she waited. What was it? 7 years before it was her turn to be with the king. So how many women did he go through before he got to Esther?
7th reign of his year, yeah.
Yeah, so think about that. I mean, think about the number of women that he went through, which is crazy. So, she just shows up on the scene from Mordecai, and she's instantly taken care of. Like, Mordecai kind of threw his cousin's name in the hat and said, here, maybe this will better us. And told her,
Can you imagine how they're going to make this buy up?
That's what I'm wondering too.
So put your shoes in either Esther or Mordecai, right? So think you're either Mordecai or Esther. How would each of these characters have felt throughout this process?
How would they think?
How would Mordecai be thinking through this process?
I imagine he was anxious
Okay.
all the time, wondering how she was and if she was taken care of, which is why he kind of hung out by the gate and kept checking on her and checking on her and checking on her to make sure she was okay, because he obviously, cared for her. He raised her, and like any doting father, he wanted the best for her, but probably sat there second guessing whether that was a good idea.
A good idea.
If she was going to be found out, if what was going to happen to her.
Now, do you think maybe he felt that way because he was hoping she would get chosen so that they would have favor in their family?
What the game.
Oh, I'm sure
Right?
it's his intention.
So what about Esther? What do you think Esther was feeling this whole time? I don't know about you ladies, but I've been like, I don't know if I'd want to be an object, right? Because she would be feeling that way, wouldn't she? Being paraded around and being oiled up all the time. And
We really don't know how old she was either.
We don't.
She might have been very young.
well, they say they were virgins. So it was probably, under 17. Because usually men and women at the time got married around 16, rough, sometimes a little younger, because their life expectancy was only like 30, 35 at the time. So they would probably been fairly young. So yeah, I think she'd be scared too, right? Because here you are, you've got to go be with the king, and if you've never done anything like that, what would be going through your mind, right? It'd be tough to do that. Any other thoughts on that? No? Okay. So the author mentions 3 times that Esther won approval in someone's eyes, which happened in verse 9, which says, Haggai was very impressed with Esther and treated her kindly. He quickly ordered a special menu for her and provided her with beauty treatments. He also assigned her 7 maids specifically chosen from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maids into the best place in the harem. Okay, so then again in 15, Esther was the daughter of Abihail, who was Mordecai's uncle. Mordecai had adopted his younger cousin Esther. When it was Esther's turn to go to the king, she accepted the advice of Haggai, the eunuch in charge of the harem. She asked for nothing except what he suggested, and she was admired by everyone who saw her. And then in verse 17 again, and the king loved Esther more than any of the other young women. He was so delighted with her that he set the royal crown on her head and declared her queen instead of Vashti. So think about that. So what does this tell us about Esther?
She must have been beautiful.
She was liked by all. Even her maidens.
Okay, she was beautiful. What else? Accommodating. Okay.
Well, it said she won the favor of everyone who she saw.
So she's a good communicator,
Yeah.
right?
I think
She's
pleasant.
probably carried herself well. She was able to talk to people and get favor on their side, and people trusted her. So that's a pretty good skill to have, right? Especially if you're trying to win the king's favor. So she wasn't like the everyday run-of-the-mill person. She had some, I guess what you'd call it, cultured to her. She would have been, maybe had a little more poise or whatever, and people liked her for that. Of course, we don't know what she looked like, so maybe she was just really ugly and she was just good at talking to people. We don't know. Or she was really beautiful. We don't know what she actually looked like.
Sounds like a combination.
So, so whatever it was, she won the approval of a lot of people. So think of someone who finds favor with others because of their presence and their personality. How can you begin living out one of the characteristics of that person in your own life? Who do you know that finds favor with others? Excuse me.
I work with a girl that's just extremely kind. And, a lot of times they'll try and be as kind. She just never gets mad, and she's always very sympathetic to whoever she's talking to, but she's also very genuine. So she puts people at ease and never makes anybody angry. There's a comfort level she gets with them, and I don't know how she does it sometimes. It's just, I don't know. I can't wrap my
Your head around it,
head
right?
around it. It's just, but she is just, just so extremely kind and always very engaged when she talks to customers, always makes them feel like they're the most important, but it's not an act. It's not like she even tries. It's just
She's genuine.
She's very, very genuine.
So how would you be able to live that out in your life then?
I don't know. That's why.
It'd be hard. It'd be hard, right?
I've listened to her, on the phone and to talk to people, and it's just a feeling you get from her, and I don't know how you duplicate that feeling when someone is that
That's a
genuine.
gift.
Well, that's a good example. Anybody else having a good example of who finds favor with others and you'd like to replicate?
I think my father does. He's always welcoming people and wanting to be around others, and always positive. So, which has been a good influence on myself.
So how could you do that in your own life, or how have you done it in your own life?
I try harder to count my blessings and look for all of the good, like he always does. Even in people he meets or comes who sometimes I feel like are taking advantage of him, he never looks at it that way. He always just wants to continue to give.
Okay.
And so, which is what God has taught us to do. Sometimes it's hard to do that, though, when you feel like their purpose is something different
Right.
than what is true. So.
For me, it'd be two people. It would be my mom's dad, which was my one grandfather. It didn't matter where he went, someone liked him. Someone knew him. He would talk to people. He was in the Lions Club, and he was pretty high rank in the Lions Club. They ended up making a pavilion after his death for the one chicken barbecue thing he helped out with, and people didn't ever seem to have a bad thing to say about him. He wasn't a very loud man. He didn't talk brashly. He didn't boast about stuff he did. He just was nice to everyone, and never, like Maureen said, it was just genuine. He was just a genuine person. And the other would be Amanda, because, and this is why I love her to death, because she balances me out. She'll recognize the good in people when I can't always see it. And it's just like your dad. Like I don't often see it, because I still have my defenses up of everything that happened in my life, and I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm going to trust these people. And she's like, well, how do you know what they're going through? And so, and I'm reminded of it every day, just by the way she acts, because she has such a big heart that, and especially for animals. If I'd let her, we'd have like 500 cats. Because she wants to adopt everyone that's hurting and suffering and in a cage. And I'm like, look, we can't. But, she wants to help out. So we go to, like, benefit dinners and stuff to raise money for the SPCA. And we help with the homeless shelters and with the food distributions down there. And so it's good to have her on my side, because she reminds me of the stuff that I tend to forget about sometimes. I get caught up in the mix of things, and I don't remember that genuine being nice and personable to the ones that I don't necessarily agree with. And so that's something that's hard to do. If you find favor with someone in your life who's looked favorably upon by others, if they're genuine and they're not just putting on a show, it's a good thing to imitate and use in your life.
What about the girl that was a homeless girl? She's been on the TV. She was down there in the big city, and somebody stole her violin, and she was living on the street. Maybe you've seen it. And she was singing, and the acoustics in the area was so good, and she was really singing. But she was homeless, and somebody's picked her up out. And I was told the other day now that she's got new clothes and all, and she's singing. But somebody helped her out.
What, in Wilkes-Barre?
No, it was out in California.
I
California.
don't know where it was.
Yeah, see, I don't.
That was a violin player.
Yeah, and
And
somebody
got stolen
stole it.
from her, and she ended up homeless and on the streets, and she ended up using her voice in the subway, and a cop heard her singing and brought her to the attention of someone that could give her a job.
Well, there you go.
But I thought that was quite the thing.
Yeah.
So many young women were brought to the palace and placed in the harem. What was the role of these women? And how would Esther's life, role, and rights be different from the harem when she became queen? So what was the role of the women in the harem first?
Who's the king?
Yeah.
Okay, to please the king. Usually in any form he wanted. Okay, so how would Esther's life, role, and rights be different from the harem when she became queen?
She moved to a place of honor.
She would.
Okay, she moved to a place of honor.
I believe she would also have rule, like as the king, partial or in companion.
Okay.
Wouldn't she have some voice and authority also, where she didn't have any of that before?
Sorry to bother you.
Oh, you didn't bother us, Dave.
It's gonna be quiet now.
You're all right. We were just wondering who was upstairs.
Yeah? You heard us walking.
Yeah.
Okay, have fun.
Sorry, continue.
5 weeks, we'll have something to write up.
5 weeks.
Continue, Sharon.
I just think he's chosen her as his companion, but she'll also have some type of authority too,
Okay.
as a queen.
And my
She had
footnotes
that before.
my footnotes say this: God placed Esther on the throne even before the Jews faced the possibility of complete destruction, which we'll see next week, so that when trouble came, a person would already be in the position to help. No human effort could thwart God's plan to send the Messiah to earth as a Jew. If you're changing jobs, position, or location and can't see God's purpose in your situation, understand that God is in control. He may be placing you in a position so you can help when the need arises. Did you ever think about that? That's a different way of looking at it, isn't it? I don't know why I'm here, but I'm sure there's a purpose for it, right? So, Esther would have had a different life. You're right. She would have been higher regarded. She wouldn't just be completely an object to the king, even though she was kind of an object. He would have valued her opinion more than the other women there, because the other women were basically just property. So, you have any questions so far? Everyone's okay? No issues, no red flags, nothing? Okay. No mispronunciations of names that we need to clear up before we go the whole way through and everybody's confused. So the author mentions several times that Mordecai instructed Esther to keep her identity hidden. What might have motivated that request?
She would have never been queen if he would have known, right?
We don't know if that would have happened or not.
When
She
she
was-
looked down at that time.
Yes and no. They, like I said, they were allowed to have some freedom and own businesses and be in government, but we don't know how they were physically looked upon. We don't know if they were just treated as slaves. We don't know what the king's thoughts of the Jewish people would have been.
Well, Mordecai must have thought that that's what was happening because he didn't want her to tell them.
Well, why would Mordecai think that?
Because probably had seen it firsthand.
Well, his grandparents probably saw it.
Yeah.
And so it probably was carried down through his family what the Babylonians did to the Jews. So he could have been worried, right?
Right.
About being hurt or being mistreated or maybe being killed. What else could have motivated that?
You mean for Mordecai to have Esther keep secrecy?
Keep her identity secret.
What was Mordecai's nationality?
He was Jewish. Maybe a little greed, right? Because maybe he thought, well, I don't have a good life, but if my cousin here gets to be queen, I'll have favor.
Well, maybe things would be better then.
Things might be better for him, right? So maybe a little bit of that. Trying to improve his situation.
I think he was definitely motivated to.
You throw your cousin into the king's harem? Yeah, he was motivated by something. Right? So that was definitely some of his motivation. Maybe to keep her safe. and realized that she would be taken care of. Because you got to remember, during the Old Testament times, if you weren't married and you didn't have a family, you had to rely on other people to take care of you, especially if you were a woman. You didn't have rights. You didn't own property. You couldn't have a job, an income. You relied solely on a man for everything that was given to you. So maybe he thought it this way, that this would be a way for her to be taken care of.
And be safe.
Because women in Old Testament don't fare well because they aren't allowed to do a whole lot of stuff. So that could have been a motivation too. Maybe just looking after her best interests as far as being an orphan and not having anyone else but him. So that could have motivated him too. So how does Mordecai enter into the plot of the story, which is verse 19 through 23, if you want to take a look at that.
He overhears guards planning to kill King Xerxes.
Okay, so he hears guards planning to kill King
And
Xerxes.
he tells Queen Esther.
And he tells Esther about it.
So, and she does credit it to Mordecai, though.
Right.
So.
So how do you think that's going to affect things? What would you do? Let me see. Sally, if Mike came to you and said that he heard a plot to go and kill a government official, what would make you think if that happened? Or something along those lines?
Well, that's completely different. Husband and wife and cousins.
Okay. It could be. Well, if
Well, you would want to tell them.
you'd want to tell somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if my kids came to me and told me something like that or something along the lines, there was a plot to hurt somebody, I would want to try to do something. And so I don't know if Esther reacted maybe if she was going to react maybe out of fear, because she probably thought, well, if someone kills the king, I just was made queen.
Yeah, she'll be,
I won't be queen anymore.
or they might
she
think
don't
she
wanna
had
be
something
next.
to do with it.
Yeah, or they might think that she had something to do with it, right?
Or be next, yeah.
So, that could all be part of his thinking of why he wanted to let somebody know.
Did Xerxes know that Mordecai was Jewish?
We don't know. It doesn't say. I would imagine so, because he would have known about his family. I would think. But then again, there were so many people brought in from other countries, he might not have. Because people didn't walk around going, hey, I'm Jewish. They didn't have signs. Sometimes they would say they did, but it depends on how Mordecai acted. And we don't know if Mordecai prayed, if he followed the Torah. It doesn't say anything like that. So what does this glimpse of Mordecai's life tell us about his character?
Caring.
Yeah, he's
Okay, cares.
good.
What else?
He's not scared to say something.
Okay, he's not scared to say something,
Like to speak up.
right?
Well, maybe he just did it. Maybe he told to make himself look good, to move up the ladder.
Okay, maybe he told Esther to let him know that this was going to happen because he wanted something for himself. We don't know. But it shows us that Mordecai either cared about the king, or possibly about what would happen to Esther if the king was killed, or cared about his own skin enough to try to thwart this plan. So there's a little bit of selfishness in there too, isn't there, about what Mordecai is doing, right? But his intentions are good because he didn't want that to be carried out. Regardless of what motivated him to tell Queen Esther, he wanted to make sure the right thing was done. So that says a lot about his character.
Maybe there wasn't even a plot to assassinate him.
They
Maybe
did,
he-
they
maybe
checked it
Mordecai-
out.
Yeah, it says they questioned the guards,
Yeah.
and they found it out to be true. So there was a plot,
Yeah.
and the guards ended up getting impaled.
Yeah, because it said investigate.
Yeah, so we know at least there was something going on.
But when Esther told the king, she gave Mordecai their credit for it. So
Yeah.
did he tell her that to tell the king that, or she just did that?
She might have just done that to say who had the source. Because we don't know.
Does the king know Malachi is her guardian? Esther's guardian?
I don't think, but he had to serve a purpose because he was in the government. So whatever he did, he had access to be able to check on Esther. And if you weren't part of something in the higher up, you wouldn't have been able to access the
Wouldn't be
harem.
there. Okay.
No. So he would have had to be something. But it's not. It doesn't exactly say what he was or what his job was. It just said that he was there. So you're right. You're right, Sally. So that's a good observation. So even though God has not been directly mentioned in the book, where do you see his hand moving in the story so far?
He's putting her in there as a Jew to help later on.
Okay.
So he wanted her to be the
But
queen.
he didn't know that the Jews were going to face any trouble, though, at that time.
God didn't know, everybody knew everything.
Well, not God. No, Mordecai didn't.
Oh, okay. I was talking about God.
But God knew that they would need to be saved. Okay, so I get where you're going with that. Where else did you see his hand moving so far? Did God have any other part in Mordecai or Esther's story? Well, he kept Mordecai alive, right? Doesn't say anything about Mordecai's parents. He kept Esther alive. It says that they weren't there. Doesn't say how they died. And he allowed Mordecai to take care of Esther, right? So he was putting all those things in steps in place, God was, so that Esther would then be in as queen. Can you imagine thinking of a time in your life when God has put stuff in place to make you who you are right now? And that's the next question. Where do you see God's hand moving in circumstances in your life right now? Nobody sees anything.
Oh, yeah.
So you think it was God's plan to put a young girl in his harem to train to be with a king? That
It
was God's plan?
it was-
I mean, to do that to a
It
girl
was
like
God's plan to put someone in his court
Which
who could speak for the Jews. Because there wasn't anybody else to do that.
And that was hidden that she was Jewish.
Yeah.
And they are the chosen, God's chosen people.
Yeah. So there is a thread of salvation through there, right? That God was trying to put in there. Now, I'm not saying that God wanted the things that Esther probably had to do happen to her, but he put her in a position where she would be able to make a difference. Because otherwise, if she would have just went to the king and said, hey, someone's trying to kill my people, he wouldn't have cared. But being the queen, he would have been like, oh, okay, maybe we need to look at this a little more, and we'll see that next week. But how do you see God working and moving through circumstances in your life right now?
Well, going on 2 years ago, I got a Christmas present. It was a card that said I would be getting a puppy. They had the dates when when the puppy was going to be born, and we had already had a dog that he was my sidekick. He my buddy, and so I really wasn't sure how I felt about that. But then I think God put that puppy, gave me that puppy to sort of ease the blow when we got news that the other dog got cancer.
And yeah, put him down.
We had to have him put down. Made it a little easier.
Okay. That's a good example. Any other examples of how you see God moving in your life right now?
Well, I struggled with, deciding what I wanted to do from high school, like where to go from there. So I had a grandmother who was a first grade teacher for many years, encouraged me to go to college, and so I kind of followed in her footsteps. But I think today, I feel like I can help a lot of kids. There's a lot of environmental issues that are imposed on them young. So
You feel like you're doing your part is have an impact on next generation to make them better.
Mm-hmm. And I know it's hard because they don't want the religion into school, but
Right.
there are sometimes it has to be given, it has to be there, so I use it.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Good.
Wouldn't tell my boss that, but I have a little boy whose dog was sick and dying, and what else do you do besides take him in the hall and pray with him?
Yeah. That's good. Well, when I first heard that I was going to be your guys' pastor, I was like, well, what am I getting myself into? Because I didn't know what was going to be up here. I didn't know how you guys were going to be. I didn't know if you were going to be nice to me, if you were going to hate me, if you'd run me out of town with pitchforks. I don't know. I have no idea, right? So it's kind of scary as a pastor because you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. And even in some times where I thought things were going to be bad, I would say, well, God, you have me here for a reason. I don't know what this reason is, but I'm here, and I'm going to do everything that I can while I'm here. And so now, seeing how Montrose is going to become a part of us, and the different things, it's really shown me that we have the opportunity to do a lot more. And I've seen that through you guys, that drive and the energy to do the stuff, but having more people is going to give us a shot of energy. It's going to allow us to do more ministry for other people. And quite frankly, I'm excited, and I think that's why God put me here, is because He knew that something was going to happen down the line, whatever it might look like, and we'd need someone here because, as Doug has pointed out, nobody really wants to come up here. Well, I don't know. I love it up here. This is like coming home for me. So it's a different change for me, but a lot of pastors don't want to come this far north. And unfortunately, like, the district is all the way up to New York. So there's a lot of space between, here in New York. That's why I think I'm here, though. I think that's why he moved me through those situations in my life, so I could share them with you. So I could show you how you can recognize God in your life and recognize how He's worked in my own life, and you can use that to help build your faith and make you guys stronger.
Well, I think we were at a standstill for a while, and then when you come in, we started waking up and
Well, I'm glad.
sprouting up again.
I'm glad you started waking up, because it's been an absolute pleasure. How do you think God wants you to respond to how He's moving in your life?
Well, this is off the subject there, but we had a speaker the other day at seniors on the grandparents, the foster grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, I really like that idea. But I'm gone, but we got it down there. So maybe somewhere along the way I can get into that.
Get into
And,
foster grandparenting.
Even if in the classroom at school there.
I'll take you.
Huh?
I'll take you.
Yeah, but I mean, that's been on my mind ever since I seen that. Well, don't you have a...
I have a grandmother comes to my room on Mondays for like 3 hours.
But I think that...
There we do. We have
okay,
a
what's your last name?
Watkins. We have a
Okay, no, that's what's...
the Blue Ridge has a foster grandparent program. So
Well, there you go.
You have a sister.
Trudy
What's her last name?
Hepler.
That's the one. Her
Yeah.
picture's in
Yeah,
there.
Noreen Jenner is her grandma.
Mhm.
Yeah, we both have grandmas in our room. So
And
I'll
as soon
take
as
you.
I
I'll
seen
take
it, but as soon as I seen it, and I was thinking, oh, I like, because when I was at school, first we could open their milk, we could talk to the kids, tell them to eat at least eat your fruit or drink your milk or something, because they come in, it's like
Yeah, it's organized chaos, right?
You know, that way. And you're trying. Then it got so we couldn't give them a hug. We weren't supposed to do anything. You couldn't do nothing for them.
It is frustrating.
And there they are waiting for you, you know.
Yeah.
If you let them hug you, it's okay.
But it just was like, and then the other day when that come up, and I thought, oh, I kind of like that idea.
Well, maybe you can do that while you're here in the first couple months of school.
But I just liked it.
Well, that's good. That's a good way. How else would you think God would want you to respond to what He's doing in your life?
I think to continue to pray for guidance on the direction He wants you to go. That's what I do a lot of.
Say, Gary could respond with his dog, right? He could get him trained as a therapy dog.
Bring him to school too.
She is trained as a therapy dog?
She's our therapy dog.
Oh, okay. Well, you're a therapy dog. But you can actually get them certified and take them to hospitals and stuff, and you'd be surprised how much that kind of healing works for people.
Well, like that nursing home down there where they wanted to see kids, and they're all bringing in all the candy so that all the kids will come in to see them and to get candy at the nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
So they were bringing in a whole lot of it for them. People
See, wherever God puts us in life, we have to be willing to serve with everything that we have for Him. Even if we don't understand the situation, even if we don't recognize why we're there, if He gives us a different job or puts us in a different place, we have to find a way to do the very best that we can while we're there. And whether that be for the church, whether that be for our neighbors, our co-workers, maybe, Maureen, it's to try to spread that lady's genuine personality to other people so that they don't get mad and flip out on people. And so it's interesting because how we respond is how it affects the kingdom of God. If we just totally ignore God working in our life, then we won't think about the things that we need to do next to further His kingdom. And unfortunately, a lot of Christians get really comfortable and they fall asleep. And I'll use that term loosely, is they don't recognize that there's so much things that we can be doing for the kingdom of God. Even if you're not qualified as a pastor or a Bible study teacher, there's so many things that we can do to help others. But the thing of it is trying to find our niche, trying to find where we fit into that.
Well, shoe boxes.
Okay, the shoe boxes are a good example. I think the meal we served was another good example. That went over really well, and those people were very thankful that we did it. And that's why I think when Montrose, when they join us, we have to find some way that we could keep that going. Whether it be, like I said, another storefront we rent or something, somewhere we could put that meal on, or we could have the community put the meal on, because it's a big deal for those people, even if they don't come to church. Some of those people I found out last winter just showed up because they couldn't afford to pay their heat, and they would come there Wednesdays to sit and be warm. So, I mean, it does serve a purpose whether they come to church or not. So, we have to just find out where we fit into that bigger picture. And like you guys gave money to the playground. It was an awesome gesture of love and kindness, because now that community in Lawton has a place they can play. They don't have to drive up here to Fairdale, which is it's only a couple miles, but they can go right to the one in Lawton and play now. During the ball games and stuff is one of the reasons they wanted to put it there. So that's a big deal.
I seen kids the other afternoon when it was sunny and bright. There were several over there on the playground.
Yep. So it's a big deal that what you guys did, and it's a big help. So there's always some way we can respond to how God is working in our own circumstances. The worst way we can do it is if we do nothing. Is if we sit and don't respond to what God is telling us to do, nothing will happen. And that's why God put Esther in place and put Mordecai where he was, so that they could respond when necessary to help save the Jewish people that were left. Because God always promises to save a remnant. And even while this is all going on in Esther, there were a few remnants going back to Israel. They were going back to Jerusalem. and starting to rebuild. So you have to remember that as well, that during this time there was a remnant of people that had decided to go back. Mordecai happened to be one that probably didn't want to go and change his lifestyle, because like we said, it seems like he had a decent one where enough that he could get Esther involved in what she was doing. So any thoughts or comments? Next week we're going to cover chapter 3, and I want you guys to take another biblical figure, think about Moses or David or Joseph, and look through that story. You don't have to read the entire story, but look through their life to see how God used their circumstances to prepare them for God's work, for his work. How did he use their circumstances? And what time will work better for everybody? You like 6:30? You want 6 so I can have it even every time. You said it works better for you for 6:30, right?
It does, but if 6 is better for everyone else, it's fine. Whatever works.
Would you guys mind 6:30? You want to keep it at 6?
Go for 6:15.
6:15.
Keeping us happy and keeping
Do I
her
hear 6:20?
Yeah, halfway.
Does that help for 6:15?
Did you?
Yeah, if 6 is good for everyone here, that's fine. I might just come in a few minutes late. Just I'm pressed to get home and get over here by. So.
Did you
Yes,
notice?
leave it at 6 if it
Leave it
works
at
for
6?
all you guys. It's all
All
right.
right.
So I
Did
thought
you notice that